drugs, all language is an abstraction from this impossible to quantify, constantly living, shifting, beautiful thing of life. And I think there's a lot to say on this, but like with language, as soon as there's language, there's an opportunity for dissociating from life by hiding in the false abstractions that exist, and by creating words, spoken or written, that reflect that dissociation. And there's also Rumi. And as
Shakespeare.
And Shakespeare, of course. I'm sorry.
I love Shakespeare the most.
He's also my favorite. But you can see that everyone can sense that the truest relationship with language is a kind of fundamentally poetic one. It's one where the abstraction reflects the living beauty of the thing it's abstracting from.
In a way that makes you more attentive and more careful of the living beauty.
Right, exactly. So as soon as there's money and you're working with it, there's the risk of entering into just pure dissociated abstraction 100%. And we see tons of examples of people doing that and just getting lost in, like, all of Wall Street is some version of this, of just getting stuck in cycles of abstraction. And there's also the potential, the solution to that is not to not talk in language or not write. It's to write poetry specifically. It's to learn to work with money, to make and spend money in a way that reflects and actually improves one's relationship with the living dynamic that it's abstracted from.
That makes me so happy. Real quick, okay, I guess this is going to sound pretty heady and intellectual, but Dave and I have been talking a lot lately, too, about the objectifying view of the world versus the more animist way of relating to the world, which, relating to the money as a spirit is an animist practice, where everything in the world is another subject. And Martin Heidegger, one of my favorite philosophers, spent a long time talking about the difference between a poetic way of relating to the world versus an inframing or an objectifying way of relating to the world. And I think so much of the scariness and the darkness that we associate with the pursuit of money and profit has a lot to do actually not with money pure and simple, but with that people misuse the abstracting function of language in putting it into this relationship with the world that's objectifying rather than poetic. So that was my little humanities major side note there, which brings me...
One more thing about the rainforest thing.
Yeah, please.
There's, I think, the abstract one of the natural potential abuses of money, but with rain specifically, clearly we can see a lot of fucked up things that happen, especially environmentally, apparently because of money. And I think you could actually say sort of because of money in a certain way. It's a little rude to the spirit of money, but I think it's still sort of like there's something inherent about the nature of money that ends up giving birth to horrific events. I believe that, and I'm a real devotee of the spirit of money.
Yeah, stay with it. Keep it real, Dave.
So, like, horrible climate change, for instance, and also like perpetuating inequity on a really huge level, just humanly. And there's something. This is people sometimes get a little mad talking this way, but there is a certain tragedy at the heart of money. It's not just its banishment. There's a tragedy in every transaction that it's very easy to shy away from. And Kate, I noticed you just posted, Kate's having, she says, an internal struggle with acquiring money. It seems like a lot of people end up acquiring it in fucked up ways. And then hoarding it or taking it from people they shouldn't. And that's, you could say that, well, just don't do that, but that's actually not possible. So any time that you're receiving money, you're receiving it from people. And they could be using that for good things. You're taking life from them in a very real way. They spent life to make money. They made money as a result of spending time. And you're taking their life force into yours to save you in time, extend your life, essentially. So there is a consumption aspect. There's an eating of people, there's a kind of cannibalism and a being cannibalized that happens through one's interactions with money. And so a lot of the time, if particularly deeply empathic people to shy away from making lots of money because they can sense that. They can sense that they're taking people's life away, which is a tragedy. It's a very real tragedy. It's also the tragedy of all of life. It's like that's happening when we're eating plants. We're taking into ourselves. You don't even have to get into the carnivore level in order for that to happen. Like our dual realm is one of mutual consumption. And like really, really great magicians like Jesus, for instance, recognize and just say like, okay, everyone eat me. Like I exist here to be eaten in a certain way. And so a lot of the practices we're going to be doing a whole chapter in the money course about it, coming to terms with cannibalizing and being cannibalized. There's another level at which there's just kind of pure love and connection, but it's super to sink into the gritty underbelly where there's dual consumption happening constantly.
Well, that makes me so happy. I feel like a big part sound crazy when I say how happy that makes me. A big part of my own journey with, going from being totally broke for years, feeling comfortable being creative with business and earning money did have to do with accepting that whole nature, red and tooth and claw kind of thing. And there's a way in which it can sound like totally demented, and there's also a way in which it's like genuine humility to be like, wow, here on earth everything eats each other, and that's what's happening. And of course there's in the whole cycle of predation with plants and animals, there's the immediate, well, anyways, I could go on, but it's a cycle and none of us are outside of it. And what I do find interesting is I definitely notice it in myself. Like I have a desire to transcend that, to just be apart from it, to be like morally, totally innocent, to have my hands totally clean. And part of this journey and why I think it's such an interesting tantric kind of poison medicine path is that this is really about not having our hands totally clean, and actually that there's probably no way to do that, to step totally out, or maybe there is, but it's a kind of an ascetic path that I don't feel called to. If you feel called to it, that's fantastic.
You also can't be eaten. Is like if the kind of highest transcendent level is just allowing yourself to be consumed fully and saying, I'm going to try to consume as little as possible. But you can only be consumed to the extent that you have a body. And so on the financial level, like you can only allow people to consume your wealth to the extent that you have expanded your wealth. There's like compassion points it has to point just as much at acquiring wealth for the sake of
others consuming it.
Exactly.
Others eating you up. Yeah. Wow. That's so fascinating. So, Dave, you and I have had intense conversations lately, different metaphors for describing money and, money as connection, money as an expression, money as gratitude, money as calcifiement, which was a phrase that I coined in an article long ago, having to do with money's relationship to debt. And I guess I wanted just to get you talking about what this has to do with opening up our relationship with the money spirit, like these various ideas.
Yeah. Okay. For the sake of time, I have to rein this in pretty tightly.
Yeah.
But I'll see if I can sum this up. So developing intimacy with anyone, like with any being or spirit, including a person, means ultimately coming to know and accept all parts of them. That's just what intimacy is. And so you could say to the extent that there's elements of the spirit of money that we do not accept and so are hesitant to notice or rejecting, we can't really be in intimacy with her. Now, some of that can shift just from meditative practices, communing with the spirit of money, but there's a huge shortcut to that, which is directly going to the source internally, finding the aspects of the self that we tend to reject, shy away from, have layered in shame, and by those, develop the capacity for approval and acceptance, and then be able to turn that outwards on the spirit of money. And And when we do that, she tends to like to hang around more and order an extra tray. So some of the most, you mentioned a couple of the kind of key aspects of money. There's a lot we'll be diving into in the course, but we'll start out, I guess, with gratitude and resentment. There's a fundamentally, so Plato splits the soul into three parts, and in at least one of his presentations of that, you have love on the bottom. And then the second key part is this hard to translate thing called thumos, which sort of means spiritedness, but really also means like vengeance or resentment. And then the third one is mind, or like intellect. So it's like he ranks love and resentment as pretty much on the same fundamental with each other. And I think that indicates something. There's something about resentment and vengeance specifically that's very, very, very native to the human soul, almost as native as love itself. It sort of comes from the feeling of love in a certain way. So starting out, because money is in a material way an expression of gratitude, you can think of it as like an official thank you note that's tradable. And it's also an expression of vengeance or resentment being debt. It's historical origins, transferable debt. By starting to work internally with the impulses of vengeance or resentment on one hand and love, gratitude on the other, then by fully feeling and embracing both of those parts, we open up a capacity to relate to money truly and intimately. The gratitude piece tends to be a little bit easier to work with, though unlocking all of one's love and appreciation is actually sort of ego annihilating. Yeah. But we tend to shy away from the like fully facing and integrating agencies.
And what was really interesting to me, and Dave and I were talking about today, was something that I found once again when I started to really grow in my ability to earn money. Was I remember very distinctly I had this recognition of the relationship with money and debt and resentment, and I was like, wait, why am I so afraid of money? I'm a really resentful person. Why am I judging money for, having all this association with debt and violence? Like there's so much violence and bitterness in my own soul. And suddenly I felt this giant compassion for money and this kind of like identity with it. Like Salvador Dali said, I don't do drugs, I am drugs. I sort of had this moment where I was like, I don't earn money. I am money. And it was just like, wow. And I could see all the ways in which, in my sort of hippie new age phase, when I had been very judgmental of money and what it does, I was rejecting those parts of myself that are angry or vengeful or resentful and that have the sense of debt and being owed. And it's really fascinating. And in our email series, we sent out an exercise that involved making a list of people who have wronged you, and kind of working through that list and finding gratitude for those wrongs and the effects that they've had. So I had wanted to get into a discussion of that exercise, but I realized we have a little time constraint, actually, where I underestimated just how much we would have to say about all of these first interview questions. So, Dave, we have a bit of a dilemma. We can talk about the exercise or we can answer the questions. Should we maybe do the questions?
Well, I think the exercise is available by email.
Yeah.
So we can dive into the questions.
All right.
Probably the exercise, just so everyone can look.
3250